2.5 goes over solving your equations in different ways. So we're going to be factoring with part 1. Part 2, you're solving them when your x is in the denominator. So we've done that before, but these are going to be a little bit harder. And then part 3 works with absolute value. So one thing that I want to go over before we even start this, for the purpose of when we were working with completing the square and using your quadratic formula, I told you that if there was a negative under the square root, just automatically tell me that it's no solution. However, I think it was back in 2.3, we went over the imaginary number I. I represents the negative underneath the radical. So you want to keep that in mind when we move further within this chapter. So you are going to start using that within anything else that you see now with that negative underneath the square root. Okay, so if there's a negative under the square root, pull that negative out with representing it with the I, then simplify the square root. Okay. Today with part 1, we're going to solve these polynomial equations by factoring. Now, you've solved by factoring before, however, you worked with like a power of 2 or a power of 3. What we're working with now is higher powers. So if we look at our first example for A, we have 3x to the 4th power is equal to 48x squared. First thing we're going to do here is move that 48x squared over to the other side, get this equal to 0. So we're going to subtract it from both sides. And that's going to give us 3x to the 4th power minus 48x squared is equal to 0. Now that all of our terms are on the same side of that equal sign, we're going to ask ourselves if we have a greatest common factor. If we do, we factor that out first. So you do have a greatest common factor between the 3 and the negative 48. 3 goes into both of them. You also have a greatest common factor between the x to the 4th and the x squared. X squared goes into both of them. So we're going to divide out that 3x squared. So that goes out front. The 3x to the 4th power divided by 3x squared is just leaving us with x squared. Then the negative 48 divided by 3 is negative 16. X squared divided by x squared is just 1. So that gives us 3x squared times x squared minus 16 is equal to 0. Now, if you want to, you can continue to factor this because that x squared minus 16 is a difference of squares. So it does factor to be x minus 4 times x plus 4. However, you don't have to. Because you have an x squared plus or minus a whole number with no x attached to it, then that means that you can just set that equal to 0, move that term over, and then take the square root of both sides, which is what we're going to do here. So this is going to give us 3x squared is equal to 0, and x squared minus 16 is equal to 0. For the 3x squared is equal to 0, we are going to divide each side by the 3, and that'll give us that x squared is equal to 0. Remember, 0 divided by anything is always 0. However, if you do the 3 over 0, that's what would give you the no solution or the undefined. So from here, we take the square root of both sides, and that'll give us x is equal to 0. 0 is neither positive or negative, which is why we do not put that plus or minus in front of it. For the x squared minus 16 is equal to 0, we're going to add the 16 over first. That gives us x squared is equal to 16. Then we take the square root of both sides. The square root of 16 is 4. Make sure you put that plus or minus in front of it, and you have x is equal to plus or minus 4, as well as x is equal to 0. For example B, we have x to the 4th power minus 3x squared plus 2 is equal to 0. Now this, treat it like you do when it's x squared minus 3x plus 2 is equal to 0. You're still going to factor it like you would there, except you're working with an x to the 4th power and an x squared instead. So when you separate that x to the 4th power, it's going to be x squared plus or minus a number times x squared plus or minus a number. And then you'll just work through those. So your factors of positive 2 that add up to be negative 3 are negative 1 and negative 2. So this is going to factor to give us x squared minus 1 times x squared minus 2 is equal to 0. From here, you can set both of these sets of parentheses equal to 0 and then solve. So you have x squared minus 1 is equal to 0, as well as x squared minus 2 is equal to 0. Move your 1 over, add it to both sides. That gives you x squared plus 1, or sorry, x squared is equal to 1. From there, you would take the square root of both sides. The square root of 1 is 1. You put the plus or minus in front of it, and that's plus or minus 1. For your x squared minus 2 is equal to 0, add your 2 over. You have x squared is equal to 2. From there, take the square root of both sides. You cannot simplify the square root of 2, so leave it the square root of 2. Just put your plus or minus in front of it. For example C, you have x to the 4th power minus 8x squared plus 9 is equal to 0. I want you to change this to just be x to the 4th power minus 8x squared minus 9 is equal to 0. Okay, so from here, we're going to find the factors of negative 9 that add up to be negative 8. You have 1, positive 1, and negative 9 that give you negative 8. So this is going to factor to give us x to the 4th power plus 1 times x to the 4th power minus 9 is, or sorry, not x to the 4th power, x squared. X squared plus 1 times x squared minus 9. There we go. So from here, we're going to separate these two sets of parentheses and set them both equal to 0 and solve them. So we're going to have x squared plus 1 is equal to 0, and x squared minus 9 is equal to 0. For your x squared plus 1 is equal to 0, we're going to subtract that 1 over. So that gives us x squared is equal to negative 1. For the x squared, or sorry, here, let's finish this one. If we take the square root of both sides here, you have that negative underneath the radical. The negative underneath the radical is represented with I. So that's going to give you x is equal to plus or minus I. The square root of 1 is just 1, so it's just plus or minus 1i. So that's 2 of your answers. Work out the x squared minus 9 is equal to 0. First, add the 9 over. That gives you x squared is equal to 9. Then take your square root of both sides. Remember to put the plus or minus in front of your answer. So the square root of 9 is 3. You put the plus or minus in front of it, and that gives you that x is equal to plus or minus 3. So you still have your 4 answers. I, 3, negative 3. For example, D, we have 2x to the 3rd power minus x squared minus 8x is equal to negative 4. We need all of our terms on the same side on this. So the first thing we're going to do here is move that 4 over. So we're going to add it to both sides. This is going to give us 2x to the 3rd power minus x squared minus 8x plus 4 is equal to 0. You have 4 terms within this equation. So group the first 2, group the last 2. From the first 2, you factor out an x squared. From the last 2, you factor out a negative 4. So that's going to give you x squared times 2x minus 1 minus 4 times 2x minus 1 is equal to 0. From here, your 2 sets of parentheses are identical to one another. So we're going to write this as x squared minus 4 times 2x minus 1 is equal to 0. You can continue to factor that x squared minus 4. It's just x minus 2 times x plus 2. If you don't want to, you don't have to. You can just set that equal to 0 since it's in x squared and a constant. So if we do it that way, we're going to have x squared minus 4 is equal to 0, as well as 2x minus 1 is equal to 0. For the x squared minus 4 is equal to 0, add your 4 over. You have x squared is equal to 4. Then take the square root of both sides. So x is equal to plus or minus 2. For the 2x minus 1 is equal to 0. first add your 1 over. You get 2x is equal to 1. Then divide each side by the 2. And you have that x is equal to 1/2. For example, E, you have 4x to the 4th power plus 4x squared minus 3. This is supposed to be equal to 0, so just put the equal to 0 with it. So that way you know that it's an equation. So in order to factor this one out, keep in mind that it's an x to the 4th and an x squared. That means when it separates, it's going to be x squared and x squared. Your a is something other than 1 here, so multiply your a and your c. Find your factors that replace your b. Replace your b with those two factors and the x squared, and then factor by grouping. So from here, we're going to do 4 times negative 3, which is negative 12. You want your factors of negative 12 that add up to be positive 4. If we have a positive 6 and a negative 2, that gives us our positive 4 that we're looking for. So this is going to get rewritten as 4x to the 4th power plus 6x squared minus 2x squared minus 3 is equal to 0. You have 4 terms, so factor this by grouping. From your first set of parentheses, the 2x squared factors out. From your second, a negative 1 factors out. So this is going to give you 2x squared times 2x squared plus 3 minus 1 times 2x squared plus 3 is equal to 0. Your two parentheses are identical, so rewrite this as 2x squared minus 1 times 2x squared plus 3 is equal to 0. Set the 2x squared minus 1 equal to 0. Set the 2x squared plus 3 equal to 0, and solve them both. For your 2x minus 1 is equal to 0, add your 1 over first. You get 2x squared is equal to 1. From there, divide each side by the 2. You have x squared is equal to 1/2. You need to take the square root of both sides with this. So take the square root of both sides. You're going to get x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 1 over the square root of 2. The square root of 1 simplifies to just be 1. However, the square root of 2 does not. So you have 1 over the square root of 2. In math, you cannot leave the square root in the denominator, so you need to rationalize your denominator here, which means the square root of 2 is in the denominator. You're going to multiply the top and the bottom by that square root of 2. So the square root of 2 on the bottom gets multiplied, square root of 2 on top gets multiplied. That gives you x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 2 all over the square root of 4, which is 2. So from here, you're going to do the same thing with the 2x squared plus 3 is equal to 0. So subtract your 3 over first. That gives you 2x squared is equal to negative 3. From here, divide each side by the 2. You have x squared is equal to negative 3 over 2. You're taking the square root of both sides here. You have a negative underneath that square root, so remember to take the I out to represent that negative. That gives you x is equal to plus or minus I square root 3 all over the square root of 2. Again, can't leave the square root of 2 in the denominator, so multiply the top and the bottom by the square root of 2. That's going to give you x is equal to plus or minus I square root 6 all over the square root of 4, which simplifies to be plus or minus I square root 6 all over 2. This part goes over your equations that involve radicals or square roots. With these square roots, we're going to be working with a index of 2, which means it's just a square root. It's not a cube root, a fourth root, fifth root, so on. Whole idea with these is to isolate the radical. Once you isolate the radical, you are going to take the power as the same as your index and raise each side to that power. That will get rid of the square root that you have, and then you're just going to work through your equation like you usually would. With some of these, you'll have an x squared. So you're going to have to either factor it complete the square or use your quadratic formula with it. So keep those methods in mind. For example A, you're given the square root of 2x plus 7 minus x is equal to 2. We have to isolate that square root of 2x plus 7 first, so we'll move that x over by adding it to both sides. So that's going to give us the square root of 2x plus 7 is equal to x plus 2. From here, in order to get rid of that square root, you need to raise each side to the power of 2. So if we raise the square root of 2x plus 7 to the power of 2 and the x plus 2 to the power of 2, that power of 2 has the same number as the index on that square root, so they cancel each other out, and you just have the 2x plus 7. On the right side, that x plus 2 squared is x plus 2 times x plus 2, so you need to FOIL that out. That's going to leave you with x squared plus 4x plus 4. Now, since you have an x squared, bring everything to the same side. You're going to move the 2x over by subtracting it from both sides. You'll also move the 7 over by subtracting it from both sides. So that's going to leave you with x squared plus 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. You have an x squared that does not have a number in front of it, so see if you can factor it. You have factors of negative 3 that add up to be 2, which are negative 1, positive 3. So this is going to factor to give you x minus 1 times x plus 3 is equal to 0. Now that you're completely factored, set each part equal to 0 and solve. So you have x minus 1 is equal to 0, and x plus 3 is equal to 0. Move your 1 over by adding it to both sides. That gives you that x is equal to 1. Move your 3 over by subtracting it from both sides, and that gives you x is equal to negative 3. So you have two solutions with this one. One that's the positive 1, one that's the negative 3. For example B, we have 2x is equal to 1 minus the square root of 2x minus x. So we're going to move the 1 over first, and we'll subtract it from both sides. So that gives us 2x minus 1 is equal to the opposite of the square root of 2x minus x. You don't want that negative in front of the square root, so you need to divide it over. So divide each side by negative 1. That's going to give you negative 2x plus 1 is equal to the square root of 2x minus x. From here, our radical is isolated, so raise each side to the power of its index. The square root has an index of 2, so we're going to raise each side to the second power. Again, that left side is negative 2x plus 1 times negative 2x plus 1. So we have negative 2x times negative 2x, which is 4x squared. Then negative 2x times 1 is negative 2x. 1 times negative 2x is negative 2x. Those combine to give us negative 4x, and 1 times 1 is 1. The radical and the power of 2 cancel out, so that's leaving you with 2x minus x on the other side. From here, we can combine like terms on your right side to give you 4x squared minus 4x plus 1 is equal to x. We move that x over by subtracting it from both sides, and that gives you 4x squared minus 5x plus 1 is equal to 0. You have an a that's something other than 1 here, so multiply your 4 and your 1. 4 times 1 is 4. You want your factors of positive 4 that add up to be negative 5. So if you have a negative 4 and a negative 1, that gives you the negative 5. So this is going to be rewritten as 4x squared minus 4x minus x plus 1 is equal to 0. And we're going to factor this by grouping. For the 4x squared minus 4x, greatest common factor is 4x. For the negative x plus 1, greatest common factor, negative 1. So that gives you 4x times x minus 1 times x minus 1 is equal to 0. From here, your two sets of parentheses are the same, so that gives you x minus 1 times 4x minus 1 is equal to 0. Separate these, set them both equal to 0, and solve them. So you have x minus 1 is equal to 0, as well as 4x minus 1 is equal to 0. For x minus 1 is equal to 0, add your 1 over. That's going to give you x is equal to 1. For the 4x minus 1 is equal to 0, add your 1 over. You have 4x is equal to 1. Then divide each side by the 4, and you get that x is 1/4. So again, two answers here, one that's the positive 1, the other that's the 1/4. For our next example, we have the square root of 2x plus 6 minus the square root of x plus 4 is equal to 1. There's no way of isolating one specific square root here, but they are still both on the same side. So from here, in order to get rid of them, we're just going to square both sides. So this side is going to get squared, and this side gets squared. The 1 squared is easy, it's just 1. However, that square root of 2x plus 6 minus the square root of x plus 4 squared is going to give you the square root of 2x plus 6 minus, not plus, minus the square root of x plus 4 times the square root of 2x plus 6 minus the square root of x plus 4. So you need to FOIL this out. Your square root of 2x plus 6 times the square root of 2x plus 6 is just 2x plus 6. Then you have the square root of 2x plus 6 times the negative square root of x plus 4. You're going to have to write this out. So it's the square root of 2x plus 6 times x minus 4, or x plus 4. And this is going to be a negative. So this becomes a minus, because a positive times a negative is a negative. From here, you have the negative square root of x plus 4 times the square root of 2x minus 6. Again, a positive times a negative is a negative. And then you're going to have the square root of x plus 4 times 2x plus 6. And then you have your minus times, or sorry, a minus square root x plus 4 times a minus square root x plus 4. So that becomes a positive, and then it's just x plus 4. And this is all equal to 1. So from here, you are going to have to multiply underneath those radicals, because you have 2 of those. So this is going to give you 2x plus 6 minus 2, because it's 2 of the same ones, the square root of 2x plus 6 times x plus 4. I'm going to leave this like this just for now, because it's going to make my life, I think, a little bit easier when I'm coming to simplifying that. So from here, I'm going to combine all my like terms if I can. That negative 2 that's in front of that square root cannot be combined with the 6 and the 4. It's attached to that square root, so you cannot separate it from there. So you have a 2x plus x, which gives us 3x, then a 6 plus 4, which is 10, minus 2 square root 2x plus 6 times x plus 4 is equal to 1. Move your terms over, isolate the square root. The 10 subtracts over, so that gives us 3x minus 2 square root 2x plus 6 times x plus 4 is equal to negative 9. From here, we move the 3x over, subtract it from both sides. This gives us negative 2 times the square root of 2x plus 6 times x plus 4 is equal to negative 3x minus 9. Next, we're going to divide each side by that negative 2. Again, we're isolating that square root. So that's going to give us the square root of 2x plus 6 times x plus 4 is equal to negative 3x minus 9 over negative 2. The negative turns everything into positives in the bottom. So it's just 3x plus 9 over 2. From here, you're going to have to square both sides. When you square both sides, remember that fraction is being multiplied by itself. So this is going to give you 2x plus 6 times x plus 4 is equal to 3x plus 9 over 2 times 3x plus 9 over 2. So that's going to give you 9x squared. The 3x times 9 is 27x. Multiply that by 2. It's going to give you 54x. And then that's plus 81. And that's all over 4. From here, I would multiply that 2x plus 6 times x plus 4. So this is going to give you 2x squared. 2x times 4 is 8x plus 6x is 14x plus 24 is equal to 9x squared plus 54x plus 81 all over 4. I don't like the 4 in the denominator, so I'm going to multiply both sides by the 4. It's going to cancel out on my right side, and that's going to leave me with 8x squared. The 4 times 4 is 16, carry the 1, so 4 times 1 plus 1 is 5. It's positive, keep the x attached to it, then 4 times 24. Again, 4 times 4 is 16, carry the 1. 4 times 2 plus 1 is 9. And that's equal to 9x squared plus 54x plus 81. Move my 8x over, or my 8x squared over by subtracting it from both sides. I'm going to move my 56x over by subtracting it from both sides. I'm also going to move my 96 over by subtracting it from both sides. So that's going to leave me with x squared minus 2x minus the 6 times 1 is 5, 9 times 8 is 1, is equal to 0. So from here, I can factor this, find my factors of my negative 15 that add up to be negative 2. If I have 3 and negative 5, that gives me negative 2. So that's going to give us x plus 3 times x minus 5 is equal to 0. Set these both equal to 0 and solve them. From here, I'm going to have x is equal to negative 3 and x is equal to 5. Oops. If we look at these extra practice problems, for number 1, you have 5x to the 4th power is equal to 40x squared. You have an x to the 4th power on one side and x to the 2nd power on the other side. Bring your terms together. So move your 40x squared over by subtracting it from both sides. That gives you 5x to the 4th power minus 40x squared is equal to 0. You have like terms between the 5x to the 4th power and the 40, or the negative 40x squared. So factor out your greatest common factor, which is 5x squared. This is going to give you 5x squared times x squared minus 8 is equal to 0. You can't factor this any further, so set each part equal to 0 and solve. You're going to have 5x squared is equal to 0, and x squared minus 8 is equal to 0. For your 5x squared is equal to 0, move your 5 over by dividing each side by the 5. You get x squared is equal to 0. From there, take the square root of both sides, so x is equal to 0. For the x squared minus 8 is equal to 0, add your 8 over first. You have x squared is equal to 8. Then take your square root of both sides. That 8 is 2 and 4. 4 is 2 and 2. The two 2's will pair up. You'll bring one out, leave the other 2 underneath. Remember to put the plus or minus in front of your answer. So you get x is equal to plus or minus 2 square root 2. For number 2, you have 3x to the 4th power minus 12x squared plus 4 is equal to 0. For this one, our a is something other than 1, so we're going to multiply 3 times 4. That gives us 12. Your factors of 12 that add up to be negative 12 are none. So you can't factor this one. So in this case, if you get one that you can't factor, just give me that it's no solution. Better to look at when we're working with these. So picking up where we left off with your equations that we worked with, that you were factoring, you're looking at number 3. You have 16 plus the square root of 3x plus 1 is equal to 20. For this one, we're going to move that 16 over first because we want to isolate that square root. So that's going to give us the square root of 3x plus 1 is equal to 4. From here, we're going to square both sides. That squaring of both sides is going to get rid of your radical and your power on the left side. So that's going to be 3x plus 1 is equal to 4 squared, which is 16. We're going to move the 1 over. That's going to give us 3x is equal to 15. And then you'll divide each side by the 3. So you have that x is equal to 5. For number 4, you have the square root of 5x minus 1 is equal to the square root of negative 3x plus 7. Now there's no way to isolate the radical in this one. So we're just going to square both sides. So if we square the right side and the left side, this is going to give us the square roots cancel with the powers. So 5x minus 1 is equal to negative 3x plus 7. And we're just going to solve this like normal. So we're going to move the 3x over by adding it to both sides. That gives us 8x minus 1 is equal to 7. Then we add your 1 over. So that's 8x is equal to 8. And then you divide, or sorry, not 1, 8. 8. There we go. Then divide each side by the 8, and you get that x is equal to 1. For number 5, we have the square root of 3x plus 2 minus 5 is equal to 0. For this one, we're going to move the 5 over first, so we'll add it to both sides. And you're going to have the square root of 3x plus 2 is equal to positive 5. From here, we square both sides. Squaring both sides gets rid of that radical, so we have 3x plus 2 is equal to 5. Or sorry, 5 squared is 25. This is squared also. So from here, we're going to move the 2 over by subtracting it from both sides. We get 3x is equal to 23. Then we divide each side by the 3. And you can leave this as 23 over 3. For number 6, you have 3 minus the square root of x minus 3 is equal to x. We're going to move the 3 over first on this one by subtracting it from both sides. And this gives you the negative square root of x minus 3 is equal to x minus 3. Divide each side by that negative 1 to make that square root a positive 1. So you have the square root of x minus 3 is equal to negative x plus 3. Square both sides. Again, that negative x plus 3 is negative x plus 3 times negative x plus 3. You need to FOIL it out. So this is going to give you x minus 3 is equal to x squared minus 6x plus 9. Move your x over by subtracting it from both sides. Move your 3 over by adding it to both sides. So that's going to give you x squared minus 7x plus 12 is equal to 0. Your 12 is factorable by negative 3 and negative 4, which gives you that negative 7. So this is going to give you x minus 3 times x minus 4 is equal to 0. We set each of these equal to 0 and solve. And we get that x is equal to 3 and x is equal to 4. For number 7, you have 3 times the square root of 3x minus 5 minus 8 is equal to 4. For this one, we are going to start by moving the 8 over first. So we're going to add it to both sides. That gives us 3 square root 3x minus 5 is equal to 12. From here, we divide each side by the 3. So we get the square root of 3x minus 5 is equal to 4. Square both sides. That gives you 3x minus 5 is equal to 16. Move your 5 over, 15. Move your 5 over by adding it to both sides. That gives you 3x is equal to 21. Divide each side by the 3. And that gives you that x is equal to 7.